Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for a small session, a short session on governance gone wrong. And we're going to look at some stakeholder considerations for a case that probably some of you have heard a lot about over the last few years. So, first of all, if you want to open your cameras, please feel welcome to. It's going to be very informal, so I'd be happy to see you and to engage with you. And I think I know some of you, but I'd like to hear from some of you who might not be from McGill, or some of you might be from outside of Quebec. Uh, is somebody willing to introduce themselves or tell me where they're from? You can use the raise your hand button on top to if you want to raise your hand, or you can also just speak. I think I see from I can see from by going over your names where you're from. Yes, Montreal. So I have some people from Montreal. Is there anybody from outside of Montreal? Nobody outside of Montreal? Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Julie Ricard. I'm assistant professor at the School of Continuing Studies here, and also I work with also the administration and governance. And I chose this case because every time I think about it, I think about it in terms of governance, and I think about it in terms of stakeholders. And I thought it'd be a great discussion case for us today. Anybody's already aware or not aware of this case? Who hasn't heard of the Northvolt case in Quebec? Everybody's aware of it. Okay. Yes. Grace, did you hear about it, or did you not hear about it? You heard about it. And what did you hear about this case? Oh, no, Grace, you didn't hear about it. Okay. And who actually heard about this case before? Yes, Dolores, you heard about this case before, Fatima as well. And what are things that you heard about this case? Sylvie as well, yes. What are some of the things you've heard about this case? Okay, let's move on. We'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about this. So today I'm going to give you a little bit an overview of the case. I'm going to give you some definitions, not too many, just some foundations so we can actually discuss. I'm going to also give you some basic tools and stakeholder management. Oh, great. Dolores said Northvolt filed for bankruptcy in Europe while getting the financial support of Quebec to build batteries here. That's fairly good, right? So recently in March, Northvolt filed for bankruptcy in Europe, in Sweden, but the Quebec, the North American file of Northvolt is not yet affected, so they do have to find a buyer for the North American file of Northvolt. So that's true. Yes. So yes. So you do know about the case. That's great. So yes. So we're gonna look at some management tools and techniques. We're gonna do a small exercise. So we're gonna go into small groups for just a little bit. We're gonna come back, have a discussion, and have a lessons learned period. So not too difficult. And at any point, please feel free to raise your hand, ask questions. or comment. It's not a straightforward case, right? Because there's a lot of opinions about this case, whether or not it was a good decision, bad decision. So there's a lot of gray areas. We're here to discuss and learn. So basically, I'm gonna first give you the corporate perspective. So Northvolt perspective, it is a Sweden company, and when they wanted to come to, they wanted to invest, right? They chose Quebec as a location to invest in a $7 billion investment to come to Quebec to build EV, electric vehicle batteries. Okay, so they wanted to build a plant here. So that decision was made in 2023, and that was to provide 3,000 jobs in Quebec. And I think the Quebec plant was among more than 70 potential locations. And they chose Quebec in part because of hydroelectricity. So they like the fact that their batteries would be built with renewable energy. And the capacity for the plant, it was going to be built in two phases, but once the two phases were to be completed, it was going to be a yearly capacity of 60, 60 yearly. And one of the considerations to choose also Quebec as a location was this because we are strategically located in the North American automotive supply chain, and also we have unique access to raw materials. For example, critical minerals, and you've heard that Canada has access to critical minerals. You've heard that from important someone somewhere in North America, right? So yes, but now since then, so many things happened with Northvolt because in 2024 they thought they were doing great. The company in Sweden, so they went for financing, but also at the same time, the forecast for EV batteries became they over forecasted. In the end, the demand was not as great as they thought, and the Swedish government didn't want to help them, and they filed for bankruptcy just now in March of 2025. So that's for the corporate perspective. Now for a Canadian perspective, we were so excited when they chose Quebec. So yes, raw material suppliers, also buyers of EV batteries were very excited. People wanted to invest. So we had the Canadian and Quebec government who wanted to invest. So they invested about $7.3 billion that were supposed to be convertible to shares, which now is in limbo, and $270 million were invested by Quebec in the parent company. But since the parent company is bankrupt, then that's gone. Also, you had major funds, pension funds that invested. They were very excited about this potential opportunity for investment. And then you had Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec that also invested. And you had also the Quebec government that invested by giving them a loan that would help them acquire the land where they would actually build the plant. So, yes, so it was perceived as the biggest private manufacturing investment in the Quebec's history. So yes, it was a very big deal and people were very excited. Okay, so there's a lot of people involved, a lot of big decision makers, and a lot of money. Now, let's take a step back and look at two definitions that are going to help us look at the next steps, the next stakeholders that are involved. There's two definitions that I want to us to look at. In a project, there's basic project management. Project management traditionally is we apply skills and tools to accomplish goals. And if we accomplish the goals within the time frame, within the budget, and using the resources that were allocated, then we have a successful project. Okay, so that's success. And it seems to be fine. But then we have sustainable projects. Sustainable projects looks beyond the project. So it's okay. We have a successful project. We made it in time. We made it within the budget, and we made it, with the resources. But what are the impacts on the people, the community, the environment? Is it sustainable? Will it last in time, or is it just now and then is it going to be bankrupt over a year? So the longevity of a project over time. So sustainable projects is another way to look at things. Okay, so sustainability. So we're going to integrate economic. So does the project create value? But does it create value considering the environment or social factors? And social factors, we think about societal benefits such as job creations, which in this case is one of the key components, health improvement, and social inclusion, right? So these are things that I want us to have in mind when we're going to look at the next ideas of the case. Other key theories that I want us to have in mind is stakeholder primacy versus shareholder primacy. And please feel free to ask any questions. So do you all know what a shareholder is? Who knows what a shareholder is? Who has the courage to tell me what a shareholder is? Okay, I will. So a share, yes, Northvolt brought the expense position also. Okay, I'll just, so someone who owns a stake in the company. Derek, thank you. So yes, someone who owns a stake or a share of a company. So a part owner of a company, right? It could be owners of share of a company. So basically, yes, thank you, Magda. So a share owner, the primacy of shareholders, we this view is based on the fact that an organization's primary purpose is to serve the owners, right? So would you agree that the primary purpose of an organization is to serve the owners, the shareholders? Who would agree on that? Unofficially? Okay, could be. So that's the traditional view of organization. So and then there's another view that says that an organization is a coalition of varying interests. So if you only serve the shareholders, you're going to be missing on a variety of interests that are influencing decision making every day, and that are going to influence all your activities, that might slow down your activities at some point, that might also help you accomplish your activities, that might influence positively or negatively your activities. So the stakeholder model is a model that takes into account the heterogeneity of the organization. And 95% of executive see stakeholder trust as critical to their success. And there's a correlation between executives who take into account stakeholder perspective into the success of their company, and it's going to affect the the share value as well in the long term. So stakeholder model basically means that we take into account stakeholder views in our decision making, and shareholder primacy means that we're going to mainly take into account shareholder value maximization in our decision making. So, quick questions for you. Which approach do you think is best for organizations? Shareholder primacy or stakeholder primacy? Okay. With stakeholder primacy, stakeholder primacy. So, the person who said it depends on the type of organization. Okay. Okay. So let me go back to the other question. Go to the how feasible do you think it is for managers to manage stakeholders' interests and influences in complex international investment projects? And that's a more complicated question. Yes, nonprofits firmly focuses on stakeholder needs. Actually, a nonprofit belongs to the community as a definition. So yes, that's part of their mission. Exactly. Yes, so it is very complex actually. And mostly it's almost impossible to satisfy all stakeholders, but following a process that help us actually justify our decisions towards the stakeholders will at least guide us through to some extent. Okay, so and there's some tools that we can use to guide us so that if we don't satisfy all stakeholders, at least we know that for what reason we couldn't satisfy them, right? So this is a tool that's called stakeholder register. So we use it to identify the stakeholders of a project. We identify their role, we identify their contact, whether they're internal or external. We identify their interest, their level of interest. So the intensity of their interest, and I'm going to show you another tool that will address whether or not their interest is high or low, and their influence on the project. And we can list their expectations. So we have to meet them, discuss with them, list their expectations for the project, and then see how they wish to be communicated, how they wish to be communicated. So that's one tool that we can use. And stakeholder saliency, that's one of the first tool that we should use to evaluate all of the stakeholders and where they are and how they're surrounding us, right? And what's our dependence on them, how they are dependent on us, and how dominant they are. Um, so what's their power, their influence on us, and the reciprocity too, because sometimes we influence them, they influence us, but that to different degrees. So sometimes it's a financial influence, political influence, and so on. So the way to do this is we look at three different characteristics: legitimacy, whether or not there's a contractual or legal claim, so obligations that are legal with this particular stakeholder. We look at whether there's power involved, so influence, hierarchy, investments, things that say that this stakeholder has a particular influence on us or vice versa. And the urgency, how urgent or immediate the claim or action that's required on the part of the stakeholder require require action now, and how unacceptable or acceptable a delay would be for us to respond to that claim. Okay, so for example, if there's a natural disaster now, the urgency is pretty urgent. Okay, so um, so these are things that we assess, and sometimes it's not just a yes or no answer; it's a gradation of intensity. And you'll see that if power and urgency are mixed together, it's you get into a dangerous zone. And when power and legitimacy are mixed together, it's contractual and power. This is a dominant stakeholder. And when you are contractually obligated to an urgent claim, then you're dependent, right? So this is a very important model to assess uh, the surrounding stakeholders. Another analysis model is this stakeholder analysis allows you to put in your stakeholder register whether or not the stakeholder has to be informed, monitored, or consulted, or you have to work closely together based on whether or not the interest is high, their interest in the project is high or low, the power is high or low. So we already know from the saliency model which stakeholder has high or low power. Now, is the stakeholder interested? Okay, so who has high interest or low interest? So, for example, investors might have a very high interest, right? So they want to be consulted on some information, right? So so this is how you can also update your register on communication, how you communicate with each stakeholder, depending on whether or not it's about monitoring, about consulting, working together, or informing. And a lot of the mistakes, it happen because some stakeholders that should be consulted are informed or not informed at all, or some that should be working together are just informed, So this is a very important model to take into account. A last technique that I'm going to discuss with you is a last model is the RACI matrix. That's really for the team that's going to work together. Okay. So this is where you list people who are responsible to work for on each task, the person who's accountable, the people who have to be consulted, or the people who have to be informed. So the person who's responsible is the actual person who's performing something. The person who's accountable is the person who's ultimately answering for the task or the completion of the task. Okay, so not necessarily the person who's doing it, but the person who's accountable for it, the quality of it, and so on, or the budget and everything, the completion. The person who are consulted could be subject matter experts, could be lobbies if there's other groups to be consulted. And the person who have to be informed are part of the list of people who in the other have low interest and low power, but might need to be informed on progress. These are sometimes regulators that need to be informed of progress of a project. So this is an example of a RISI matrix for for a construction project, where you have a project manager, a consultant, an architect, a contractor, a client, and you actually put, um, you know, who has to be informed at each point, who has to be consulted. So, for example, the project manager has to be informed of this task. He's accountable to assess risk. He's accountable to define performance requirements. He's accountable to create design, and is accountable to execute construction, and is informed of approved construction work. So this is how you work with the RACI matrix. Let's go back to our case. I won't we won't work on all the techniques today, but I want to go back to our case because I want you to try one of them. So we know that there was a lot of excitement on this by investors, by the government, by the city, by the raw material suppliers, by the automotive industry. But there were also a few issues. Do you know who didn't like this project? No. Okay, so there were a few issues in terms of environmental concerns. Okay, so first of all, a few months before. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. So yes, so there were a lot of stakeholders who were happy about the project because it brought potential jobs. So the city was happy, Quebec was happy, Canada was happy, suppliers were happy, car dealers were happy, even investors or private funds were happy to invest in this, but some people were not happy, including, for example, Equiterre, some lobbies from indigenous communities were not happy because of the potential environmental impact. Also, some people were not happy because the government, a few months before this deal was communicated, they changed a regulation that allowed to increase the number of tons. They increase the number of tons allowable for factories um, to bypass BAP. Okay, so then this factory didn't have to go through a BAP. Okay, so they changed the law in order for this factory not to have to go through a whole evaluation process. So this led to questions of ethics and transparency. Uh, Also, they thought, well, why did you refuse this site to a real estate project before, and now all of a sudden you allow it to this huge multinational? But then they didn't change the regulation, and it appeared to be just for this project. Maybe it wasn't, but that's how it appeared, and that's why it's important not to appear to be in conflict of interest. So the community, the citizens around the city, also they thought, and it was a mixed feeling, right? Some of them thought, yes, it could be a good idea, it's going to bring jobs, but some people, because of the lack of transparency and potentially the ethics, the conflict of interest, they were not sure what to think, so they thought a BAP would have been a good idea so that they would have an unbiased opinion, evaluation of the situation. Also, there was an attempt by a trio of citizens to have an injunction, but it failed. So that was a trio, though, of citizens. Also, some people were concerned about the potential health implications of having chemicals so close to their community. So health issues they felt were not being taken into account, and because there was no external evaluation, then they were a bit concerned and scared about this. And also there was housing and infrastructure concerns because they already were short in housing. Now, with the increase of potential people in the area, they didn't know if they could accommodate, plus the infrastructure in terms of roads. They had concerns about this as well. So, yes, there were a lot of positive in terms of stakeholder welcoming this project, and there were some negative concerns as well. So on the negative, there were basically environmental groups. Sorry about that. Okay. So yes, since the public had lost their trust, there was some sabotage and vandalism. Obviously, there was opposition that we saw before, and there was lack of consistency in government's environmental messaging. So yes, public. There was some people were for and some people were against this project. Nice beach, yes. Yes. Who wouldn't want to be on that beach, right? Yes. Okay. Oh, I want to make sure I don't lose you again. Okay, so basically we have to consider the three E's when we look at sustainability of a project or sustainability of anything, or sometimes we call it the 3P bottom line. So ethics, economics, or environment, or the 3P bottom line, we call it planet, people, profit. Okay, so we have to look at economics. So for example, in this case, it's job creation, revenue. This could potentially boost Quebec's economy. Okay. And then ethics involves a lack of transparency, fairness, stakeholder engagement, and here environmental impacts, concern, and protecting the ecosystem. That was part of the issue, right? They were taking a side that should have been protected according to prior BAP evaluations. So now I want us to do a small exercise. I wanted to divide you guys in teams of 3 to 4, nothing complicated. I want you to identify 5 of the stakeholders that we have talked about, and using the saliency model, uh, that we saw, which means looking at whether or not the characteristics is urgent, legitimate, or power. Try to identify each stakeholder, how each stakeholder is characterized, and then after that, I want us also to look at which approach do you think was embraced between shareholder primacy or stakeholder primacy. So I want you to take notes because we're gonna discuss your findings afterwards. So an example. So I don't want you to go out and be on your own. So let's say Broccolini was the constructor of the plant, right? So he had a contract. So yes, it's legitimate. Power, more or less, right? It's a supplier. And then urgent, yes, as when they have a claim to do as soon as the company doesn't answer, well, they're paying, right? They're paying this contractor. So it's pretty urgent. So I would say it's dependent. But then you can also rate on using for ratings like on 5 instead of using yes or no if you want. Sometimes it's easier to use a rating or color codes, right? Red, yellow, or orange. Sometimes it's better. So I we can do that for about 7 minutes or so, like just a few stakeholders, and then we can come back here for discussion. Welcome back, everybody. How did it go? Did you find it difficult? Can you tell me one stakeholder that you were able to identify? It can be difficult. And the most difficult part is to assess whether or not it is urgent. Okay, Quebec government. Okay, perfect. And what would you say the Quebec government is legitimate? Yes, yes. And would you say the Quebec government has power over Northvolt? Yes, CDPQ. Yes, okay. And would you say the Quebec government um, has a sense of urgency for certain claims? Yes, okay. If we were to, I want to take this the other way around just a second. Would you say that Northvolt has power over the Quebec government? No? Yeah, it seems that they do a little bit, right? Because the Quebec government gave a lot of subsidies, right? So they're financially binded together, right? They managed to convince them, right? Okay. So and would you say that eh, would you say that Northvolt has more power over the Quebec government or the other way around? It's a tricky question. Yes. It's a tricky question because one has a formal sort of power, right? And one has a financial power. So it's not easily calculated, right? But at this point, it's not the same type of power. Uh, would the project exist if the Quebec government withdraw the support? Uh, yes, but at this point, it's very hard to just withdraw their support, right? Um, yes, it's really hard at this point to withdraw the support because the Quebec government would lose a lot of money, right? So now we have CDPQ. Somebody said CDPQ. Uh, so CDPQ, would you say it's a legitimate? It's legitimate? Yes. Okay. And would you say that it's urgent? No, because now it's yes. So no. And then would you say that they have power over CDPQ or CDPQ has power over them? CDPQ, do they have power over Northvolt? No. Okay. So that's good. And how about um, critical mineral suppliers? Are they legitimate? Um, are they legitimate? They don't, do they have contracts yet with critical minerals? Yes, probably. Okay, yes. And then do they have urgency? No. Okay. And do they have power? Do critical mineral suppliers have power over Northvolt? No. Great. Doing good. Perfect. Okay. So I had some here for you guys because you could rate with numbers, you can rate with colors, but it's important after to go and check. For example, here, province of Quebec, I had put definitive because it was everything. The citizens, they don't have legitimacy, they don't have power, but they have urgency, environmental lobby, no, no, yes, no, and indigenous community, no, no, yes. The reason I put this here is because I wanted you to see that the people who didn't have legitimacy tended not to be consulted to the same level as the stakeholders who did have power or legitimacy, right? But doesn't mean because on one part of the project you have no legitimacy, that on other parts of a project, you won't have legitimacy. For instance, now it's assumed that citizens have no legitimacy because they are not yet employed. But eventually, down the line, some people might be employed, some people might be getting sick, some people might be having lawsuits. Okay, we're extrapolating, but it's to avoid problems down the line that you have to assess stakeholder considerations early on, because by using project management traditional, by saying, okay, we're doing everything very quick in the beginning without consulting, and you do things very easily, very on budget, timely, everything, then you're pushing the problems down the line. You're pushing, and then that creates concerns from citizens, vandalism, and it slows down the process, slows down the construction, right? Because now you didn't consult people that eventually might become legitimate stakeholders. Okay, so some lessons in stakeholder governance. Well, have more transparency, right? More transparent decision making is critical. Have a more balanced approach, right? Like we said, now they only seem to consider stakeholders that had power or were legitimate. So consider stakeholders that might have some power in the future or might be legitimate in the future, or even that might not have legitimacy, but that could have an influence over the quality of your project in the future. And look at sustainability long term of the project, not phase by phase. So we're going to accomplish this right now. It's going to be great. We're going to bypass phases. We're going to bypass the BAP. It's going to be quick. But then after that, we're going to probably face problems and delays in constructions because there's so much anger or concerns from citizens, environmental groups, and other types of lobbies. So moving forward, recommendations, more stakeholder engagement, regulatory transparency, and more balanced development. How do you feel? What do you think are some of the recommendations you would give to Northvolt? Now, in hindsight, there's a lot of things that we could say financially, but in terms of stakeholder engagement. No, nothing. So I invite you to online info session on May 15th. There's two sessions, one at 12 and one at 6. And then, oh, that's for you, Angus, to say? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Just if you are interested in any of our programs, we have a couple info sessions coming up. As Julie said, there's one at 12 p.m. and there's one at 6 p.m. So whichever one you want to attend, that's up to you. I'm going to be putting links to those sessions in the chat, so to allow you to register. So if what you listen to stay interested you want to know more about what you could possibly do with us, then you're more than welcome to register and get some more information. Thank you, Julie.
Oh, you're on mute, Julie.
Here are some of the programs you might be interested in that cover either project management, governance, or stakeholders. So some undergraduate certificates, graduate certificates, or professional. And if you have any questions, please contact us.
There are some questions in the Q&A, Julie, if you don't mind. There was one person who asked, can you show again one of the shareholder templates? Someone else asked, the three P's are planet, people, and what else? Oh, you're muted. You're on mute, Julie.
Sorry. People, planet, and profit. And let's go back to the stakeholder. Okay, the stakeholder registry is the one, the template they want. Is that it?
This was Pauline. So if Pauline wants to say whether that's the template.
Okay.
Stakeholder saliency, the one before the slide on stakeholder saliency.
Okay. Okay, this one.
So this one, yeah.
This one, you can find a template like this on monday.com. There's a template center. I can show you if you stay with me a little bit. I can go on monday.com with you and show you the template center. Can I do that or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hold on a
Someone
second.
also asked, by the way, is it mandatory to have a person accountable and responsible for all tasks? In your example, the Northvolt example, the A is missing somewhere.
No, well, it's always better to have a person accountable, because otherwise, if nobody's accountable, you know, it's hard to manage the project. So yes, you're supposed to have a person accountable for all project tasks, but there are tasks that are a bit unofficial. Okay, so that at that point, you don't have to have a person accountable for a little thing like a project launch, for example, you know. But yes, for the main tasks, the main important aspects, for example, construction or assessment or risk, that you'd want somebody accountable. But yes, things that are really, really key. But sometimes it's a document signing could be that, but usually in that file, you're gonna put things that are really key and you really want somebody accountable. I'm on Monday right now. Here you go on monday.com now, because I already have I already signed on Monday, so that's my account. I don't work on Monday that much, but I go for the templates, right? So if you go on Monday, work management, and you go more, you're gonna have a template center here, and you could do stakeholder register, and you'll have it here, use template. And of course, this is the free version. So on the free version, you have a few things, but then you could also have the paid version where you have much more things to manage your projects. And then, yes, here you can change the names. You could put, right? Yeah. Yeah. Other questions?
I think there's one more in the Q&A. No, I don't see anything else in the chat. Just a reminder to people, those links that look like from Microsoft Virtual, those are for the get to know session. So the first one I sent is for the 12 p.m. The second one that I sent is for the 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other questions though. If there's no other questions, then I suppose that's it for today.
Thank you.